Would you believe this?
Yeah.
As we all know, George Washington was our first president.
And as we all know, Martha Washington was our nation's first lady.
But was she his first love? Was she even his true love?
In Better Books today, we're taking on that question with the wonderful, the talented, the beautiful Mary Calvi. She is with WCBS. She's one of the news anchors there, but she was my first love back in News 12 a long time ago. Mary, the last time I saw you was probably 20 years ago.
Scott, it's such a pleasure to be here with you.
So
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here with both of you.
All right, well, you're out with a new novel called Dear George, Dear Mary that dives deep into the love affair between General Washington and a woman named Mary. And we're speaking to a woman named Mary.
Yeah,
it is so great to see you.
Oh, so great to be here as well with both of you. I was really stunned, actually, that the research was even accessible. And so finding these documents, it was just like piecing them together like a puzzle.
Did you always have a fascination with George Washington, though?
I was always interested in history, but never really realized I could find a story that no one else had found before about George Washington in his 20s. So we're talking about a young Washington who was quite the stud, actually.
Yeah.
You know, we know him from the dollar bill and from General and President, but the Washington I found was a man who was writing love poems and love letters and dancing all night with the ladies because they all wanted a touch of him.
So there's another lady. There's Mary. And did she come before? I think we have a picture. Did he really love this Mary, maybe?
So what I discovered was first this incredible painting that was done in the 1800s. This is Colonel Washington and Mary Philipse. This has been in storage for many, many years. And I believe that they had quite the relationship, and the research was showing me a deep love between the two of them. And this was Washington before Martha.
And she was a beautiful woman, whereas Martha was she was a handsome woman.
Oh, Scott.
But, you know, and I know your book is a novel, but it's based on a lot of truth in that there are letters back and forth. How did you come across these letters?
So the research really took me everywhere. It wasn't like I could find them in one box in a storage unit somewhere. So some of the research was done at Houghton Library at Harvard University, New York Historical Society, a library out in California called Huntington Library. I also got documents out of England, out of Canada, out of Virginia. It was everywhere. However, when I started doing the research about Mary Philipse, the documents were sort of pouring out of the archives because I don't believe anyone had thought to research her. But quickly I learned that even historians of the day talked about how Washington fell in love with this woman.
So I guess the question begs to be asked, why did Washington not end up with this?
Oh, well, that is the question, isn't it?
It is, because
Scott,
I would think it's like Prince Philip and Camilla. Right?
Except that...
Prince Charles and Camilla.
Charles,
you would think that, instead of marrying Diana, he would have married his true love, Camilla.
So what I discovered was, and it's actually the end papers in the book, there was a deception that was going on. And in fact, this is the list of all of the other men who wanted to court Mary Philipse.
Oh, my.
Mary Philipse, I believe, was the richest single woman in colonial America. She owned 50,000 acres of property, and you saw she was quite beautiful and educated as well. And so these men also wanted to court her, and I believe they deceived and betrayed George Washington. They were his own commanders in the British Army at the time. So Washington begins in the 1750s willing to give his life for the British Army, and within 2 years he has this deep, bitter resentment toward the British Army. So I went through documents and documents during that time, and I believe his own commanders deceived him to try to move in on his girl and seize her surrender, as it was said back then.
This is really remarkable.
It was really incredible to be able to find this never-before-known story about Washington and this woman, Mary Philipse, and a man out of New London, Connecticut, Joseph Chew, had served in the military, but also served as Washington's confidant. So when Washington had come up to see Mary Philipse, he then had to be stationed down in Virginia, and it was Joseph Chew who wrote to Washington and gave updates about Mary Philipse. And I believe Mary waited for George Washington. This is the letter that I had a chance to see. There was a series of letters from Mr. Chew to Washington, and it helped me discover this story, this unrequited love.
So did Martha know about Mary, and did Mary bother Martha, or was it just never talked about, or do you know?
So there was a bit of a dilemma in the research and writing because Mary came before Martha, and after Mary had married another man, and I believe she had waited for Washington for quite some time, then George met Martha. A few months later, Martha was a widow of 8 months and had 2 children, had a good amount of property, plantation of 4,000 acres, not the 50,000 that Mary had. And that's where Martha comes in. It was really fascinating, and in the book you'll see there is a letter that reveals some really intimate information about George's feelings towards Martha Washington. And I wouldn't want to give it all away.
Right, no,
but I believe it tells a story about their relationship. And it's really interesting that you asked the question, because, of course, these are the questions that I was wondering myself and fascinated by. So I just sort of completely got caught up in the research, and I just took it on as this passion project, and I just could not put it down.
So, but you're an anchor at CBS in New York, and how did you find time to squeeze this all into one schedule, Mary?
It was one of those things that, you know, when something gets a hold of you and you just can't. Exactly. And so I would anchor the morning news and the noon newscast, and then I would head off to like New York Public Library or just kind of get through. So I had I obtained as many of the rare books from that time as I could to be able to discover the story. So I was like deep into the books and going through digital archives. I'm in that generation that's caught between, you know, that card catalog at the library, but also the digital archives. So it sort of collided, and I was able to like look at the digital archives, but then the information that I couldn't find through the digital archives, I would be able to seek out in the library. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was years worth.
Quite the story.
Thank
We're
you
so
very
happy
much.
that you came to visit us.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here, and it's so lovely to see you,
And
Scott
for
Haney.
anybody,
After
Mary and I worked at News 12
We worked together,
back in
yes.
1997 and 1998, and
Yes.
you went on to great things.
And you went on to
and
great
here I am
things.
at Channel 3,
Oh,
so it's
love
great
it.
to see you.
So great to see the both
And
of
the,
you.
to
the
have
book
you.
is fantastic. So
Yeah.
if you're interested in learning more about Mary's book, head to her website. It's marycalvi.com. You're going to find a link there to purchase it.
And Mary's also doing a book signing and
Cool.
a talk later this week. You will find her at the Byram Shubert Library in Greenwich Thursday at 7 p.m. You'll have all the details there on her website. And again, you can get the book, Dear George, Dear Mary, where books are sold, so you can find it lots of places. Thank you
Mary,
so much.
I don't